the way I grew up, my dad was always talking to me about risk. So anything I ever wanted to do, and I love my dad, but he was always saying, what about this or what about that? And he was always kind of looking at the half glass empty. Mm-hmm. So I can remember switching jobs at one point in time, and I told him that I got a new job and I'm switching companies, and he said, do they offer health insurance? Like he was always kind of looking to find, the thing that I didn't think of. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, my parents were both teachers, and I kind of grew up with that whole mindset of, kind of being told that you want to mitigate risk. Mm-hmm. It was never said that way, but it was always any idea that I ever had, it was kind of pointed out, did you think of this or did you think of that? And I thought it was interesting. My buddy's dad said that his first comment, was, that's awesome that you guys are looking to expand. And I don't know that that's how I grew up.
That is Andy Ayers this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Welcome back to this little journey that we are going to take through a conversation here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian, and I am the host and your captain here on this little trip that we are going to take. My guest this week is Andy Ayers, and he is one of the owners of Restore Cryotherapy in Lancaster. And before we get into the interview, I made the mistake of not having Andy kind of explain what cryotherapy is for some of you who may not be aware. So I'm going to do my best here to just briefly describe it. And essentially what happens is there's a chamber that you get into at Restore. The chamber is filled with liquid nitrogen. The liquid nitrogen is below negative 100 degrees Celsius. So it's super, super cold. And you wear socks that come up to your knees. You wear slippers and you wear mittens and just your underwear. That's it. And you get in the chamber. You're in there for about 3.5 minutes, 3 to 3.5 minutes. So I did it while I was there. It was my first time ever doing it. I didn't really know what to expect. I just knew that it was going to be cold. And the best way that I can describe it is it's kind of like walking into the freezer section at the beer distributor. It's just really, really cold. It's a dry cold. It's dry air. So I think that made it a little bit better, but cold is cold. So whether it's negative 40 degrees Celsius or negative 100 degrees Celsius. I don't think it matters at that point. Cold is just downright cold. But the benefits that you get for it are just absolutely amazing. I felt this great energy boost as soon as I got out of the cryo chamber. It helps with recovery. It helps with inflammation. There's been a ton of research that's been released surrounding cryotherapy and cold therapy and everything. So if you haven't heard of it, if you're a little bit interested in it, go ahead and do a little bit of Googling. I'm sure you're going to find it, just anywhere on the web, and you can learn a little bit more about cryotherapy. And we do talk about it a little bit in this podcast as well. But back to my guest. My guest for this week, his name is Andy, and Andy is one of the owners of Restore Cryotherapy in Lancaster. They actually own another location, him and his partners, also down in Virginia, and they started this a little while back. And Andy, as he says in the podcast, he always had the dream and the passion to start something on his own. And so when this came up and there were some other people that were going to step in, he decided that this was definitely something that he wanted to get into. And we kind of weave our way through his story of both health and entrepreneurship, starting this company as he is still also maintaining a full-time job. So without further ado, I would like to bring you my interview with Andy Ayers. All right, so I am here at Restore Cryotherapy in Lancaster, and I'm here with the owner, Andy, and we got connected through a mutual friend, very good friend of mine, very good friend of yours, Rob Allen. Did a previous podcast with him. He's the owner of Speed Sleeve, and he's also doing some sales and stuff for Pactimo. And so when I did the podcast with Rob, he's like, listen, you have to get out to Restore and you have to talk to Andy and hear his story and hear everything about what he's doing there. So it took a little pressing for me to get your info and everything from
Gotcha.
Rob. I'm like, hey, like, come on, I want to get connected. So he, got us connected via email, and we scheduled this. So I want to just say thank you so much for, having me out here. And
Thanks for making the trip out.
I got
your first cryo
got
session?
my first cryo session, and I've been a longtime fan of the Joe Rogan podcast. And we were talking about Dr. Rhonda Patrick and everything. So I've heard so much about cryotherapy, but unfortunately, I really don't think there's a place that's close to us down in Wilmington. So
We're welcome to have you up here anytime.
Yeah, that was definitely. It wasn't as bad or as kind of cold as I thought it was going to be, but I will say that you did a very good job of also distracting me while I was in there and talking to me about what was physically going on with my body while I was in there. And you turned around and you're like, okay, well, you have 20 seconds left, and so we're going to hit the thing there.
We find that sometimes we have that conversation with people twice because the first time they're in there, they don't hear a word that we say.
Yeah, don't quiz me on what you told me while I was in there.
But, it definitely helps, to talk people through a session. We always have somebody with the client, no matter how many times they've done it, to have a conversation with them. It's how we get to know people too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And so when was your official opening date for Restore?
So we opened here on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And we had a grand opening event, and it went amazingly well. We actually did 100 cryotherapy sessions that day.
Wow.
Which was exceeded all expectations, that we ever had,
Mm-hmm.
For a grand opening day. You kind of go to bed the night before and you wonder, all right, is anybody going to come? And that question was answered loud and clear. We were open, I think, 9 to 5 that day, and I think we walked out of here at 8 o'clock. Wow. So it was a phenomenal response by the community. Lancaster's been a huge supporter of what we're doing. It's this small city that everybody thinks of as Amish country, but, it's gotten a lot of publicity and a lot of press lately. It was written up in Forbes magazine as one of the top 10 places to visit in the country. The restaurant scene, the downtown environment. And I grew up here. My wife and I are lifelong residents. And what we've noticed over the years is that at least in the last 5 to 6 years, as new concepts come into Lancaster that are in place in places like Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, LA, the community here gets way behind them and supports them, and they tend to do very well in Lancaster versus maybe 20 years ago might not have been the case.
Yeah. Well, and I noticed that there's a Trek bike shop across the street, so I'm sure that
absolutely
that kind of helped you out too.
That's actually where I got to know Rob for the first time.
Okay.
Over at that when it was Bike Line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just went through. That's a whole nother side story.
Totally.
But Trek with Bike Line and all that. So aside from cryotherapy, you actually offer not just the cryotherapy tank that people have probably seen online, but you offer a lot of different services here, from the recovery station and the IV drips and everything. So talk to me a little bit about what you guys are offering here.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we basically like to think of Restore as a platform for hyper wellness. So whether it's chronic pain, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a weekend warrior, whether you're just like me, 48 years old, and want to feel a little better than you currently do. The objective here is that we can, serve a lot of different needs, and it's not just one thing that's going to be perfect for everybody. So a lot of places across the country that I've visited offer cryotherapy and cryotherapy only, or they'll offer cryotherapy and Normatec compression. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about Restore is, like you said, we have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. We do local targeted cryotherapy. We do IV drip therapy, micronutrient testing. and, a host of other things too. And I think we have a incubator in Austin, Texas, where the company was founded, and they're constantly evaluating new modalities. So the idea is that maybe even 3 years from now, there might be some things in here that you don't see anymore. And there might be some other things that currently aren't here that you do see. But we're always looking to push the envelope with technology, with the latest in research, to try to bring the latest and greatest to the recovery world, whether it's chronic pain, athletic recovery, or autoimmune disorders, or whatever it may be. Yeah. So, even like at our Westport, Connecticut location, we're piloting photobiomodulation right now. In Austin, Texas, they're piloting and rolling out allergy testing and a stretch lab as well. So definitely the envelope is getting pushed on the different modalities that we can offer and be kind of the one-stop shop for recovery.
Yeah. And so for you, would you consider yourself like a lifetime athlete? You've been in athletics and you've been training. I know that you're a runner now. So did you come from that athletic background?
I did not. I was I lifted weights through high school and college, really, but that was about it. Kind of traditional weightlifting. Mm-hmm. And then I got out of college and I got a job, and I was on the road all the time, and I was not eating healthy. Really basically not living a healthy lifestyle. And I think when I was 30 years old, I woke up one day and I was almost 200 pounds and didn't feel well, couldn't sleep at night, and decided to just kind of draw the line. So I started running. And, that turned into, one thing that you'll learn about me is if whatever I do, I either do 100% or I don't do it. Mm-hmm. And so I became 100% into it. And that's kind of where it all started, really. And then it branched into a lot of different directions over the years.
So I guess one question that I have that comes to mind directly from that, especially coming from that weightlifting background, is why did you go for a run? Because anyone who comes from that weightlifting background, they absolutely loathe cardio. They don't want anything to do with cardio. Like the 20 minutes of fasted cardio that most weightlifters do in the morning is like agonizing for them. So why the run?
I think it was probably the fact that my goal was to lose weight. Mm-hmm. Really. I'm 5'9" on a good day, and at 200 pounds, I was making the decision whether to go buy the next size up in pants, mm-hmm. or to do something about it. And so to me, I kind of equated running with, maybe I could lose some pounds. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of why I started with running. And then, like any runner will tell you, if they haven't been a lifelong runner and they came to running later in life and they're into it, is that the more you run, the easier it gets. Mm-hmm. And it got easier, and entered a few 5Ks, a few 5-mile races, and that's kind of when my passion for endurance sports and functional fitness kind of got started.
And so you were probably like mid-30s at this time?
Yeah, I was probably mid-30s at that time. And then I had a friend who he was a cyclist, and he said, you should get a bike. So I got my first bike, and he invited me out for a bike ride with him. And I said, how long are we going to go? And he said, we're going to do 50 miles. And I said, should I be doing that the first time I ride my bike? And he said, you'll be fine. And
famous last words.
Famous last words is I was pretty much, we made one rest stop midway through, and I think I went around the back of the convenience store and said a few things and had a few bodily fluids come out of myself at the same time. So, but I was hooked again, hooked again on that. So that got me into riding a bike, and eventually, triathlons and bike racing and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a huge community for it out this way as well.
Totally.
There's a ton of rides that are always going on out here. I know just from talking and following with Rob, they have the Wednesday night ride that they're always doing out here, and there's just a really strong cycling community out here. So I mm-hmm. could see how it would pull you in.
It definitely did. I mean, I did triathlons first, and I loved those. They were phenomenal events. My kids were young at the time, so mm-hmm. they loved going to the events. Even at 9 years old, my son did the Mount Gretna Triathlon, which is a local sprint triathlon. We actually had to get permission because he was only 9.
Yep.
And funny story on that, my wife was a high school swimmer, and I had to actually really work hard at swimming. The swimming portion of triathlon, I actually had to get lessons.
Most runners do.
And,
mm-hmm.
So the race director said he can do the triathlon. Your 9-year-old son can do it as long as somebody does every leg of the race with him. And he was a swimmer, a summer swim league swimmer. And I had to get my wife to do the swim with him because I couldn't keep up with him. So I rode and ran with him, but she had to swim with him. So that was my triathlon experience. But I eventually worked my way up to a mid-pack swimmer.
Okay.
And really enjoyed it. But consistently the bike, I was always finishing in the top 10 in the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And I think somebody said to me, you should just race bikes. And you mentioned the Wednesday night ride. Rob invited me out to that one night. And I thought, well, I'm a pretty good cyclist. And I'm finishing in the top 10 of these triathlons, so I should be fine. And I promptly got dropped after the first turn and couldn't understand why. And so that again, there was another challenge to kind of overcome and figure out.
I believe they call it Wednesday Night Worlds.
They do, yeah.
It's a pretty serious ride, and
Yep.
Rob's a very modest guy, but he's like, oh, you should come out to the Wednesday night ride. I'm like, there's no way. Like I've seen what you guys are holding power that is just.
It's been 10 years since I've done that, so it's been a while since I've done that. But yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting into the athletic side here. You're doing some triathlons. You're doing some cycling. I'm sure your recovery was probably at this point just about as good as mine, which is
zero.
It's not.
Right.
We look at recovery as like the time where we sleep between workouts and then just boom on to the next one. And so I do want to kind of talk about what you were doing for your recovery, if anything at all. I mean, like I have a foam roller. I do some of that stuff. I try and stretch when I can, but were you doing any sort of recovery?
I really wasn't. I mean, I really wasn't doing any sort of recovery, but I would definitely push myself to the edge. And, it's funny looking back now, what would end up happening was it would result in, a half a dozen donuts being taken down in a matter of 5 minutes, or a half a tub of ice cream, just because I was pushed to my limit. And so, obviously, I'm doing all this to be healthy, and obviously there's aspects of training and recovery that I wasn't doing that I was doing that was not healthy. So, it was, pretty much non-existent. I would, probably like a lot of people go through periods where you would stretch, but it wasn't anything significant or serious or meaningful probably. Mm-hmm. So, and then I got, I sort of got out of the whole bike racing scene. I had an accident, downhill on a downhill race, or it was a downhill finish, and I crossed the finish line, and the person next to me didn't hold their line, and their handlebars locked into mine at the end of the race. They kind of moved over into my line, and we both went down, I think at about 52 miles an hour. And I pretty much, it was interesting. I got up and I checked myself out. I was actually fine, minus the road rash. I couldn't find my gloves, and they were up around my elbows. So that's why you should wear gloves. Mm-hmm. They ended up peeling the whole way up to my elbows. And that just kind of freaked me out a little bit, having a young family and realizing like, this is actually a dangerous sport. Just about every race I was in, there was an accident. It usually was behind me. But so I sort of stopped racing after a while. I think I did a few more races, and then I just really got into running, just because I was traveling a lot, and it was always easy to do.
Yeah. You just need
a pair of sneakers.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what I did. Probably, up until about two years ago, I would say I was a pretty serious, runner, where I would enter a lot of events, and did the Philadelphia Marathon about 5 years ago. And really just kind of loved it because it was easy to do. It's a great way to see new places too.
Yeah.
Go for a long run in a new city. So I was having a lot of fun with that. And I think probably the thing that got me most interested in kind of figuring out my body, though, I was always interested in the training aspect of how you could actually train yourself to compete in bike racing versus triathlon. I became a USA triathlon coach when I was doing triathlons, and I never coached anybody. I just wanted the knowledge to go through the material and kind of understanding the training zones and the, kind of putting a year-long plan together myself. I did have a coach, but I kind of wanted to do it myself. So it was always interesting for me to kind of learn about how you could do this. And the body's an amazing thing, that you can train it to run a mile fast, or you can train it to go for 6 hours. And I was always fascinated by that. So I had I was actually I think 2012 or 2013, I went on it was kind of a day like today. It was 100 degrees out, and my family was away at the beach, and I loaded up my water bottles, and I went for a 100-mile bike ride. And I ran out of fluids about halfway through, and I was in the middle of nowhere. And, so I was dehydrated, made it home, and rehydrated with dinner and a bottle of wine, which probably wasn't the best recovery once again. And for the next 10 days, I had back pain, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I'd be at work, and I'd be sweating. And I'd say to my coworker, man, it's really hot in here. And he said, it's actually kind of cold in here. And so one night I just couldn't get comfortable in bed, and I had this back pain, and I said to my wife, I'm going to drive myself to the ER. And she thought I was crazy. She's like, do you want me to go with you? I'm like, no. I said, something's wrong, though. I'm not sure what it is. So they did a chest x-ray, told me I probably had pneumonia, and they sent me home. I played golf the next day with my son, and on the 17th or 18th hole, the back pain started to come back. And literally, we're driving home, and I'm having trouble breathing. And we got into the kitchen at home, and I hit the ground. And I was on all fours, and I'm gasping for air. And I told him he was probably, 12 or 13 at the time. I said, you need to call 911. And so he called my wife first, and she happened to be like a block away, and they drove me to the ER. And then they did a CT, and they found out that I had pulmonary embolisms in both lungs, and which I was very lucky that I'm alive today. So, that's usually something that people don't survive. But the doctors kind of told me that, hey, because you're in such good shape, my right ventricle was so enlarged from the stress and the pressure and the multiple infarcts that, they were just amazed that I was there. So that was the year after that I ran the Philadelphia Marathon then. And I really then got all about my body and trying to figure out, I wanted to know what caused that, number one. And then, you sort of realize that, I should probably be doing some other things too to take care of myself. And that's when I kind of got into the whole biohacking, listening to some of these podcasts and trying to figure out, what you can do to make yourself, live as long as possible in as great a shape as possible.
And did they ever figure out what caused that?
They did. I have a genetic blood clotting disorder called factor V Leiden. And I have the version, I got it from one parent. So they knew that it was the homozygous version that I got from one parent. If it was heterozygous, I would have had it from both parents. And funny story on that, my mom said, well, I want to get tested and find out if I have it. And my dad said, well, I'm not getting tested. And I just laughed, and I said, Dad, you realize that I got it from one parent, so only one of you needs to get tested. It's like, so my mom has it as well. She's never had an event, but I was on blood thinners after that. And that's really when I kind of stopped doing I guess that's really when I stopped doing the bike racing and downhill skiing. And, because you're on blood thinners, you don't want to have any type of head trauma or injury associated with it. So, but, no future problems. It actually made me a healthier guy overall from a diet standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, from an exercise standpoint, and, always trying to look at things that you can do to protect your body.
And so you said you were traveling a lot in that early 30s, mid 30s. What were you traveling for, and how far away from Lancaster were you traveling?
Yeah, I mean, I still travel. I work for a med tech company, and I travel probably 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay.
Mainly in the mid-Atlantic states, between New Jersey and North Carolina, as a full-time job, and that's, on any given week, I'm here a couple of days, and I'm on the road a couple of days. Yep.
And so that's in the medical industry. So you've been in the medical industry for since you graduated.
I graduated from college and spent 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and then I've been in this industry for 15 years in the medical device space itself.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And that is it. So I actually had somebody else on who was in the medical device space, and he is the guy that created the pack that goes between your shoulder blades.
Oh, wow.
On your back for hydration.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And he came from the medical side too.
Very cool.
And so I said to him, I'm like, did that help you at all as far as trying to get products or sourcing or anything like that? I mean, like, I understand you're looking at medical devices, you know, but even still, some like the elastics and stuff like that. And he's like, no, it didn't. Like, it wasn't even close.
I think the only thing that you recognize is that, I mean, you understand how a clinical study is done. You understand the mind of a physician, and kind of, and a lot of these people that come in here are patients of physicians. So you kind of understand that kind of Western medicine world, and kind of what it's all about. So that's helpful, just to understand that. And you understand different trends too, like the fact that I think today, more and more people are spending more of their own dollars on healthcare than they ever were before. People are in high deductible plans. They have health savings accounts, and they're now able to make, and information is much more prevalent. I mean, look at what we're doing right now.
Yep.
And there's a lot of great podcasters out there that are talking about different ways of getting results from whether it's recovery or chronic pain or autoimmune disorders. So I think it's helped in that aspect, just to understand, kind of that whole world. And it's kind of been my world for the last, 25 years.
Yeah. And so when you were kind of in, I guess, that point in time where you had just found out, maybe I should kind of clean up my diet a little bit. I have blood clotting disorder. You were probably then like in your late 30s?
I was probably, no, I'm 48 now. I was probably 42 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that makes sense, because you said it was like 2013. So I'm sure you started exploring some things there, but then around what time did you get kind of this idea of Restore?
So I'll back up and I'll just say, I had a business that I started with a friend in college, and I've since that time I've always been looking for that business that I could start again.
And what was that?
So I'm going way back in time, but it was not my idea. It was his idea, and it was a great idea at the time. But for the people in my generation that are listening to this, they'll remember when they went and rented VHS videos. And we went to Penn State University, and we put advertisements on the actual video cassette cases. So we would partner with local video stores. I mean, there were tons of them at the time. And we would put advertisements, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. And we had everything from pizza shops to car dealers to bike shops to apartment complexes that would advertise with us. And we had a whole market research that we did on it. It was a legit business. And it served us really well in college. But it was frustrating at times too, because we learned a lot. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes. But I still go back to that time, and it was the most fun I ever had, because it was ours, and we were building something, and it was great. We were able to take out more than $5 out of the ATM, after we had that business, because it succeeded.
And you weren't eating ramen.
We still were, but we had money for. We didn't have to wait for the dollar pitcher night.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, I guess to go back just a little bit further from that, when you were younger, and in like middle school, high school, and through there, college is a little bit different, because to an extent there's people telling you what you can and cannot do and what you have to do. But like, middle school, high school, there's always like a rule. There's always a boss. One thing I want to know is, when you were working through, high school, did you have a job with a boss, and did you just absolutely despise that?
No, I actually... I'm probably one of the best employees ever, because I'm a pleaser. I really like to make the people that I work with and work for happy that they have me. And I of everything that I've ever done, I've always tried to do it the best or better than anybody else. I never want to leave anything on the table. So at 11 years old, I had a paper route, 2 paper routes, in fact. I think when I was 10 years old, I dug up a bunch of rocks and sold them on the side of the street. I was always doing something. And then I think I was 14 years old when I got a job at a local pharmacy.
Okay.
And, through the time I was 14 till the time I graduated from high school, probably worked 30 hours a week. I'd ride my bike up to the pharmacy after school, and, learned a lot of life lessons there. It was a small business. And I still think back to some of the lessons that I even learned, doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had once, and I mowed yards, and I had one summer where I worked at a 110-degree spring water factory, taking cases of spring water off of an assembly line and stacking them on pallets for 8 hours a day. And I was in the best shape of my life then.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Yeah, that's almost as similar to, like farm work.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Taking hay bales and throwing them on the back of a truck.
Yeah. And they started, I couldn't understand why they started. There was 5 college students that summer, and it didn't seem like there was enough for all 5 of us to do. And I asked somebody why they hired 5 people, and they said, because you guys won't be here in a week. And they were right. I was the only one that was left after a week.
Wow.
So I've always loved the work, appreciated the work. There were people there that had worked there for 20 years that were doing that job. And you just sort of get an appreciation for what people do to support their families.
Yeah.
And just neat people, too.
And what about following rules? Have you always been okay following rules? Because that's the other thing that I've found with some of the entrepreneurs and people who jump and launch stuff on their own is that they don't like being told what to do and when to do it.
I'll tell you what I don't like is so there's a lot of value to me in process, if it's for the right reasons. What I really don't like and don't care for is, bureaucracy and people that can't make decisions. I can certainly get behind somebody if they want to make a decision and it's the wrong decision. They might have good reasons why it might be the right decision. But I a lot of my friends, they're committed individuals, that they're not afraid to take a stand. They're not afraid to do something. They're not afraid to move forward. So I don't know if it's rule following as much as what drives me crazy is inaction and lack of progress towards a goal. Those are pet peeves of mine. If you're going to spend time talking about something for an hour, we should do something.
Right.
We shouldn't talk about it again in a week for an hour.
Like meetings about meetings.
About meetings,
that
which
kind of a thing.
For sure. Yeah. So those are the things that sort of drive me crazy, that I don't have a lot of patience for. And those are the things that can kind of get me down a little bit.
Yeah.
Is when you're not moving forward.
Now, so you have kids at home and stuff, and you're traveling a lot for work. And was there anything when you started to kind of get this idea, like, man, that thing from college, like, that was maybe one of the times where I was the most happy. Like, was there anything, like a catalyst that was going on for you, aside from missing that so much that you wanted to just jump?
I think so. You go through this period of time when you do have kids, and where I think my willingness anyway, not everybody's, but my willingness to accept risk was a lot lower.
Mm-hmm.
Now my son's in college. He's going to graduate in a year. My daughter is getting ready to go to college next year. And I sort of think for me, it's kind of time in life where I felt more comfortable taking some risks, maybe a little bit more mature too, where I've seen other people take some risks. And even when they haven't worked out, it's not the end of the world. And they learn something, and then they try something again. And, eventually they figure out what works. So it was probably more just what really got me kind of pointed in this direction, again, was the concept itself of Restore and what they do, knowing who the founder of the company was, and having a relationship with him. And then I think really just I've always been a student of entrepreneurs, and I wanted to be one in the worst way. At 48 years old, I finally said, or 47 whenever we got this going. The idea was finally like we should probably just move forward and do it,
And so you talked with the guys who own Restore down in Texas, and they said to you, hey, we're looking to really, really grow this. Like, we want to get this growing, and we want to get it going fast. And, we've been thinking about franchising this out. What was going through your head at that time, and how did you kind of handle that and land on the decision to even just say, hey, let me know if you do in fact do this?
Yeah, I visited a couple of the Restore locations, and I loved everything that they were about. And I really believed in the founders of the company too. There was a lot of good going on with what they were trying to do. They had a lot of experience. this wasn't just a fly-by-night organization. They had run businesses, large companies, been successful entrepreneurs before. So this was something that they had been working on for the last 3 years. And at the time, I think they had 4 or 5 locations. And yeah, I think now there's 13 locations with, I think, another 25 set to open in the second half of this year nationally. So it's really picking up a lot of steam based on the success that all the individual units have had. And for me, it was the relationship as well with a couple of other people. So I have a good friend and colleague who lives in the Pittsburgh area, who, again, sort of in the same shoes that I was in. And we've always been bouncing ideas off of each other and looking at, different business ideas, different endeavors and things like that. We had 2 friends in the Virginia area who were kind of doing the same thing. And the 4 of us kind of got together and we said, hey, maybe it's a good idea to do this together. So we formed an LLC and we decided to do this together. And our partners down in the Virginia area opened our first location in September of last year. And then we followed it up. My wife, Michelle, runs this location here in Lancaster because obviously I have a job and I travel and things like that. But, she really manages this location. And the goal was to have locations in each area that we live, and eventually then begin to expand out beyond that.
So you have the one in Virginia that serves the 2 people who are down in Virginia.
Yep.
Now you have one here in Lancaster for you and your wife. And so ultimately you would like to try and open up a third in the Pittsburgh area.
I think we're looking Pennsylvania, potentially Philadelphia market.
Okay.
We're kind of doing that search right now. I mean, things have gone well, and all the indicators are that we want to move forward with additional units.
Yeah.
So it's been great. But to get to your original question, I think what really got us over the hump was the fact that we call it safety in numbers, call it the fact that we hadn't done this before. It made sense to do. Your investment was a little lower when you were doing it with 4 people than just yourself. That had a big play in it when you're thinking about laying out cash. We self-funded both locations, so didn't take out loans.
Yeah.
To do that on your own, would have been a little more challenging. But, kind of now you look at it and you're like, I think you look now and you're like, wow, I could have easily done this. It's not that big of a deal when you believe in yourself. But I think I was hesitant to do that before until almost taking this step in between, with a couple of other partners.
Why do you think that is?
So
I'm sure you've probably been very successful, in medical devices and in that industry. Like
I had this conversation with Michelle the other night. One of my friends, we went down to, he lives in the King of Prussia area, and we went down. He was dropping his dog off at his parents' house. And he said, what are you guys doing today? And I said, we're going to look at some other potential locations for Restore. And he said, that's awesome that you guys are looking to expand. And I thought that was a really interesting comment because kind of the way I grew up, my dad was always talking to me about risk. So anything I ever wanted to do, and I love my dad, but he was always saying, what about this or what about that? And he was always kind of looking at the half glass empty. So I can remember switching jobs at one point in time, and I told him that I got a new job and I'm switching companies, and he said, do they offer health insurance? Like he was always kind of looking to find the thing that I didn't think of. And so that's really, my parents were both teachers, and I kind of grew up with that whole mindset of kind of being told that you want to mitigate risk. It was never said that way, but it was always any idea that I ever had, it was kind of pointed out, did you think of this or did you think of that? And I thought it was interesting. My buddy's dad said that his first comment, was, that's awesome that you guys are looking to expand. And I don't know that that's how I grew up,
right?
With that type of enthusiasm around go for it. So my son's in college now, and it's funny, we have this conversation all the time. He brings up an idea, and I said, you should go try that. And so I'm sort of parenting in the opposite way, if you will.
Yeah.
And my parents were awesome people, and I love them. But that's the one thing that culturally was just how they grew up.
So your first day goes very well. You do over 100 cryos, sessions here. But I mean, talk to me about some of the people that have come through here, some of the people that you've met, and really some of the people that you've helped as well, because I'm sure that has come into play.
Yeah, it's probably one of the favorite aspects of this business for me, and for Michelle and for all the people that work here, is the people part. We have a guy, Richard Perry, he's a wrestler, and he's a 2020 Olympic hopeful. And he's been coming in here from a recovery aspect, with access to all these modalities in here, from cryo and compression to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And, he just, I watched his interview the other night. He wrestled at Lehigh and he made it onto the U.S. national team, his first U.S. national team. And he came in here the other day and, just, with his, U.S. national team hat on. And, so guys like that too, a guy that trains, a lot of athletes who was a former NFL player, Daryl Daniel. He's a local guy that is trying to help people get to the next level. He had access to all this stuff when he played in the NFL, and he's now not just sending his clients here, but he's coming himself and getting benefits from coming here. And he understands the importance of recovery, because he was sort of forced to do it in the league. So that's one aspect. Guys like Rob, who come in, Rob comes in for his B12 shots. He's vegan. So he's, the only way that you can get B12 is through animal proteins, or through B12 injections. So, he's coming in for stuff like that. And, he goes hard pretty much every day down in his pain cave. So the athletic community's been amazing. The chronic pain and the autoimmune disorder population is incredibly rewarding to work with. We have a couple of daily members that come for different reasons, whether it be rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or chronic back pain. And, to see the smile on their face, to realize that this was their difference maker. They'd tried a lot of different things before that were helpful, but didn't give them the total relief that they were looking for. So whether it was acupuncture, physical therapy, chiropractic care, they were still needing something else. And this has been a difference maker for a lot of them. So that's been incredibly rewarding. And I will say, we're not a miracle cure either. We need those partners in the community, the PT folks, the chiropractors, the physicians, to help people as well. There's a lot of different aspects to chronic pain. There's a lot of different aspects to recovery. And we're really quick to help people kind of find those resources in addition to what we do as well.
And I know at the beginning you said that they're testing new stuff in Austin, and some places are trying this and some places are trying that. In regards to your place here in Lancaster, how much freedom do you have as far as what goes on here, and how much is kind of blanket across all Restore locations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I was always sort of negative on the idea of a franchise.
Yeah.
Just because I have ideas of my own, and I think the cool thing about this franchise is it really doesn't feel like one, in the sense that you don't want it to. But on the other hand, the things that you don't want to spend time on are figured out for you. I'm not figuring out the pricing model or the point of sale system, or how to make up the monthly promotional flyers. What I'm able to do is to focus on the clients, focus on business development in the local community. And that's really cool. And we have direct access to all the people that run the company, given that it's still a relatively small organization, but growing, and they're doing all the right things to grow as well. We were, like I said, in Virginia, we were the second location. So there was a lot that we did. We made a lot of mistakes, quite frankly, when we went down there and opened that location. Not because of Restore, but because of this was our first location, and we were naive in some aspects around just construction and contractors and architects and things like that. And Restore now has all that kind of pre-programmed and figured out, so that when we opened this location, that was sort of automatic. And that's really not what we want to spend our time on anyway.
Right. So
I think, I feel like we have a tremendous sense of freedom and flexibility to do what we need to do to be successful here. And it's been a lot of fun.
So from the difference from Virginia to here, Restore, did they come in and say like, okay, this is how the building's going to be set up, and this is where the tank's going to go, and this is where the cryo chamber's going to go, and they basically have the whole layout for you, and then how does that work with contractors and stuff like that? Because I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was really overwhelming when we did Virginia, and it was a little less overwhelming when we did Lancaster because, Jim Donnelly, the founder of Restore, is a really smart individual that as new franchisees come on board, he's been investing in personnel and headcount and support structure. So he has an individual now that handles all the general contracting portion of things. So, we worked with a commercial real estate agent to find a location. Once we did that, there's a national search for contractors. So Jim has somebody now that handled the bidding process. Jim actually has a national architectural firm now that can also do all the build out as far as the drawings and designs and mechanical engineering plans. And it's helpful to have that same company do that time and time again because there's some unique aspects of our business just around electricity and nitrogen and things like that.
Oh, you mean like that giant
like
nitrogen tank
correct.
That's in the back there?
Correct. So, like in Virginia, our contractor had never seen anything like that. So that was new, and we faced some hurdles. We didn't face those same hurdles here, and I don't think we'll face those hurdles in the future as well. So the franchise has grown in the aspect that it should to make things easier with each location that opens.
Now, I know you said that the strength in numbers played a big part in launching your first one in Virginia and then, coming here, doing one in Lancaster. But I'm sure that even though you had, somebody step up and say, oh, I'll do that with you 100%, and then you had somebody else come into, no, I'll do that 100% with you. I'm sure that there were still some doubts and some things that were going on in your head. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say I was probably the worst of the four of us at that, from, getting cold feet to going all in. And depending on what day you would talk to me, I had all kinds of different emotions going through my head. So I probably frustrated my partners at times around stuff like that. But my one partner knows me really well, and he talked sense into me. And then my network of friends and other people were also giving me the go ahead and urging me to go in this direction. So yeah, you definitely, until you do it, until you do something. So I just always admire the local business person or the entrepreneur that took a concept to production like Rob did with Speed Sleeve. I just always admire that because you face so many things along the way that it would just be easier to say, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And that was me. And now I feel like it's not me. And that's been super rewarding. It's really changed my life in a lot of ways and made me realize what's important and even changed who I associate with in some aspects.
And how do you think that you overcame that? Like, was there anything internal that helped you overcome that?
Doing it, it's not, it's kind of like, once I went on that 50-mile bike ride, my first bike ride, I realized I could do it. And I've been reading a lot. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts over the years. I've been developing relationships with people that have succeeded in business with their own company, people that have started and succeeded. And you start to realize that, you need to believe in yourself, and nobody's going to do that for you. And so that's to me, that was just a complete shift in mindset. I'm a little frustrated it took me so long. But I've also said I'm never going to look back. I'm going to appreciate the journey, and I'm not going to dwell on the fact that I didn't do this when I was 30 or 35. Right. I'm going to be excited about the next 20 years of my career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why that Nike slogan works so well.
Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. It says so much in such little, in 3 words.
Yeah, absolutely. So going and spinning off of that, because you are now someone who is in this position and has just done it, whether it be starting a business or, where you were at 30 years old, 5'9", 200 pounds, and you're like, well, I can't do this. what is some advice that you would give to that person who was in your shoes when you were thinking about starting Restore, and Monday you're all in and Tuesday you're all out basically, and you're.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to. I was listening to your podcast with Rob, and I think the one thing that resonated with me in that, which is very true, which is, is it a priority for you? And, are you going to make it a priority, or do you just like to talk about it? And I think you just have to recognize, do you just enjoy kind of being on the sidelines? And some people do, and that's fine. And some people get a lot of entertainment out of just kind of being on the sidelines, and it's more of a hobby of, looking at different businesses, analyzing it, helping them in their own career that they're in, and things like that. That's fine. But if you really want to do something, you have to make it a priority, and you have to surround yourself with people that will help you in the ways that you need help. Maybe it's not motivation that you need help with. Maybe it's the financial aspect that you need help with. Maybe it's legal help that you need. Whatever it may be. Who knows what it could be for that particular individual, but figuring out what you need and getting that help from other people around you, and other people are super willing to help. The most helpful people are people that own businesses that want to see other people do the same and realize the same satisfaction that they've got out of running a business and having their own company. And I've always found that those people are super willing to sit down with you for a cup of coffee, think about the places that you go and buy things locally. It's amazing if you ask a few questions and say you're thinking about doing something, the advice that kind of pours out of people. And we've certainly felt that here as well.
And I think one thing that I would add to that is to not be afraid to ask for help. And I understand that I guess it's kind of like a pride thing, and people don't want to ask for help. They want to, the title of the podcast is "Do It for Yourself." So, people want to do it. They want to do it for themselves. But, in that same breath, it's understanding that you don't have to do everything by yourself, and someone can offer up help and knowledge and kind of push you in the right direction.
Yeah, and even just sharing your idea with 10 people and getting them to poke holes in it, and why wouldn't this work? Why would it work? Do you think I should pursue it? It's market research, that you can kind of take back and say, well, people are going to have questions about X, Y, or Z. So I didn't think about that. I need to address that. But I think you're 100% right. If you have, you have to figure out what your risk tolerance is, and you have to say, you just have to jump in. If you're going to do it, you have to jump in with both feet. You can't do it sort of.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. Most things don't work that way.
Yeah, and there's no halfway.
There's really not.
I think that for Restore and everything that's going on, here and in Virginia, and then looking into some other places, I think that you having the support of other people there, and you having the support of your wife here, you personally may not be in with both feet, but you've kind of built up a little bit of a team around you to also compensate and help with that. No question.
And that's the other part, is who you have that works for you and works, beside you. You have to have that 100% right in order to feel good about it. So if you're traveling and you're on the road and you're not at your location every single day, you have to know that you've got the right team in place. And that's universal no matter what you do for a living, having the right team in place of people that you can count on, that are as committed and want to see things succeed and believe in the vision that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up there.
Sounds great.
I want to say, again, thank you so much for having me out here to Restore, giving me, a full tour of everything and sticking me in the chamber there.
You bet. You did great. You did a great job.
I think I'm definitely going to be back. That's for sure. That's
awesome.
For sure.
Anytime, you're welcome.
Yeah, but this was great, and thank you so much again.
Thanks, Ian.
All right, my friends, we wrapped that one up, put it in a little box, popped a stamp on it, and we sent that one out. I would just like to take a minute to thank you all, the listeners who have been giving me such great feedback on not just this episode and the previous episode, but all of the episodes who have come out. I'm really enjoying hearing your feedback, and I also really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with me. If you could just take 2 minutes for me, please. This is my only ask. And leave a review on whatever podcast source you are currently listening on. If you are on the Apple Podcast, this is super, super important. It's really going to help with the rankings, which then helps me continue to book the great guests to have these great shows. So if you could just take 2 minutes, nice and easy for me, just leave a little review. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And I will see you next week.